Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, July 30th, and 2020. Yes, that's right. I forgot what year it was for just a moment. I began to give you the time of day for some reason. Might as well do the traffic as well. I don't hear any, and I can't see any. So we're all in the clear. Weather looks like blinds. So, take your chances out there. How hot is it? It's about this hot. So, there you go. You've got all the news you need to get started in the morning. Where do we begin? The real news, I guess, for this morning is that, the economic numbers are out, and the economy and the GDP contracted something like just under 33%, I think, for the period of April and May. Is that right? I'll go and grab the story. I don't usually cover the economic news all that closely, but that was the big news. And even the doubters, like, I guess he's a doubter, Josh Barrow. I don't follow him closely enough to figure out whether he's a doubter in this theory. But the theory being that whenever you get terrible economic news or terrible any other kind of news, Donald Trump will attempt to distract you from that news with something outrageous and crazy. And I guess what he's doing this morning, it even has Josh Barrow, a believer in the distraction theory, tweeting this morning that, maybe Trump figures it would be a good idea to delay the election until people can vote safely post-COVID. Not that there may ever be a post-COVID period. We're not really sure about that. Can't promise anything, not here in the United States, and not as long as Donald Trump is in charge of anything and his authority is recognized. So, I don't think it's a good plan. It may not be a plan at all. It's just garbage. He's tweeting this morning, I guess based on the fact that everybody wants to use absentee ballots to vote by mail. He's let everyone know. Of course, he's been called out in the past, criticizing voting by mail as rife with fraud, though he himself votes by mail. But you see, he votes by mail. Absentee ballots. He uses an absentee ballot to vote by mail. And as he clarifies for us in his genius tweet this morning, absentee voting by mail is good, whereas regular voting by mail-in ballots, is bad. The difference being, I do one of these things, and all the rest of you want to do it too. That would be bad. That's the way he puts it. With universal mail-in voting, not absentee voting, which is good, 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. And too late. Everything's a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote? Question mark, question mark, question mark? 3 question marks because he's so good at punctuation. And, of course, people rushing to point out he can't delay the election. Well, there's a lot of things he can't do that he tries to do nonetheless. Is it just a distraction from the horrific economic news? Maybe. But now we started off the show talking about the horrific economic news, so I guess that didn't work. What do you know? It was that easy to defeat. Anyway, people are yelling back at him now, and, of course, pointing out that there's no difference between... no substantive difference between mail-in voting and absentee voting because, when you vote absentee by mail, then there's really no difference at all, is there? Golly, somehow that's good. There is in-person absentee voting, which doesn't sound initially like it makes any sense, but what it really is early voting. We had that here in Virginia. We've substituted no excuse absentee voting for what we used to have. We had this weird system whereby if you knew you were going to be absent from the district on the day of the voting, the regular election day, then you could go to early voting, but we didn't call it early voting, but it was voting and it was early. So you tell me what it is. And you would go and you would say, I'm going to be absent later, but I would like to vote early now. And they would say, I'm sorry, we don't have early voting. And say, well, I would like to vote absentee, but not on the day when I'm going to be absent, rather now, in anticipation of my absence. And they would say, well, that makes sense. Go right ahead and do so. But first fill out this paper and tell us, why will you be absent on Election Day? And the answer is, I will not be here. But there are many, many reasons why one might not be there. And so you were supposed to pick one. I'm going on vacation. Perfectly fine. You could just write it. I'm going on a business trip. I am, I don't know. I have dementia and I might be lost that day. I'm not certain what other choices you had. Being in college was one of them. But, yeah. So anyway, they got rid of that stupid system just recently here. Once we elected Democrats to do our legislating here in Virginia, they said, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't we just we'll have some early voting and we'll have absentee voting, and you don't have to tell us why you're going to be absent. We just believe you. You say you're going to be absent. You send in one of these ballots. You can't vote on Election Day in person once we've sent you the ballot, unless you bring the ballot with you because it came late or whatever. And that's going to cause some problems, I suppose, when ballots don't show up. But I'm sure we have a law for that, too. I just haven't looked it up. Hasn't happened to me yet. Greg Dworkin is here. He's not absent at all, and yet we're not hearing from him. And the reason probably is I haven't said, hello, Greg. So, hello, Greg. How are you?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I was thinking of making an early call.
It's a good idea. What's your excuse?
It's a no excuse early call.
Right. You don't need it anymore because we're sensible.
I don't need an
people.
excuse.
Okay, so let's just get rolling. But really, what is your excuse?
So MEP Fuller, who covers Congress, wrote an interesting tweet this morning.
Not
He
member
said,
of European Parliament.
I spent yesterday talking to House Republicans about unemployment benefits in the economy, and I assure you, they do not understand the severity of this crisis at all.
That's not surprising.
It is not surprising watching them act and react.
Yeah.
Now, as it happens, the U.S. economic output fell 9.5% in the second quarter, which is by far the largest drop in the 70-plus years of data. You get the 32, 33 some odd figure from annualizing it.
Okay. Thank you.
But for context, economic output fell 4% during the entirety of the Great Recession. And took 18 months to get there.
The great one. Yeah, all right.
Right, back when Obama was elected.
Right, that one was
when McCain
just
wanted
flu.
to suspend his campaign, we were talking about a 4% drop.
Yeah.
Now we have a 9.5% drop. And the thing is, the unemployment rate's going up. People are not hiring. And in fact, they're starting to let people go. And unemployment benefits are running out. And that's the thing that's keeping millions of people out of poverty. And the Republicans are doing nothing about it. So you basically have a situation where the virus is out of control.
Yes.
Not to cheer you up this morning. The economy is collapsing. People are going to fall into poverty. And the GOP doesn't want to spend a dime on giving money to people to not work because that's socialism or something.
Right. Plus the virus is a hoax, unless I get it.
Yeah, all of that stuff. Speaking of the virus being a hoax and them not getting stuff, the report that Jake Sherman had yesterday about Louis Gohmert getting it, which I think happened in time for us to cover on the show a little bit.
Yes, we said, ha ha, I think.
But then his staff started to email Jake Sherman with comments along the lines of, this jerk wouldn't let us wear a mask.
Right. Help, I'm trapped in a congressional factory or whatever.
Particularly Louis Gohmert's. But then in the afternoon, Jake Sherman said, based on that, I'm getting emails from all over the place. It turns out that about 100% of Democratic offices are wearing masks.
Right.
And about 50% of Republican offices are wearing masks. And of the 50% that aren't, they're actively discouraging people. One report was from a tech guy who had to make visits to these various and sundry offices. And he said that the regular old employees who aren't all that political are being put in this quandary of, like, you walk in with a mask. Why are you wearing a mask?
Right.
The pandemic. Well, you're being political. Take that damn thing on, and they basically have to say, look, HR says I have to wear it or I get fired. And that's the only way they can keep their mask on in the Republican offices who are trying to force them to take it off, like Gohmert's.
Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, but they're insane.
Very stupid. I never thought I'd be saying, thank God for HR, but I
something
guess so.
like that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what to thank God for, and that's the voters in 2018 who elected a Democratic House. Can you imagine how bad things would be if there were a Republican House still?
Thank you, God!
There we are. We have it.
You got it
on tape.
Yeah.
So we're ready to go. Good. Thank you. Yeah, things would be terrible, and many more people would be dead. So vote Democratic. It saves lives.
We're trying to save more lives. It just seems clear to me that Trump is getting clobbered in the polls because of what's going on here. The polls are only a tool. They're only telling us what's going on in people's heads. And what they're doing is they're seeing the economy collapse. They're seeing people die. They're seeing the virus not being under control. They're seeing no leadership in Washington, and they're blaming Trump for it.
Yes. Well, he is to blame for it.
But there's plenty of denial going on. I was on Twitter this morning speaking with a couple of conservative folks I know from Twitter for many, many years, so they're not trolls. And they still don't get it. Well, set aside the pandemic, there's no way Trump is going to lose Florida because, after all, more Republicans have registered in the last year or so.
Oh.
And there's Shy Republicans who won't talk to polls and all the other stuff we've already debunked.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, while all of that is happening, there's a Mason-Dixon poll out this morning in Florida, in fact, showing Biden still with a lead, which, kind of matters. Yeah. Because Florida matters. It's a 4-point lead. Mason-Dixon is an experienced Florida pollster, as Larry Sabato calls him. And Franklin and Marshall in Pennsylvania has Biden with a 9-point lead in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Hi,
Franklin. Wisconsin, Redfield and Wilton strategies. Biden with a 10-point lead. Michigan, Biden with a 12-point lead. Arizona, Biden with an 8-point lead. Pennsylvania, Biden with a 7-point lead. Florida, Biden with a 7-point lead. North Carolina, Biden with a 1-point lead. And Virginia Commonwealth University, in a rare Virginia poll, has Virginia Biden plus 11.
Oh. Okay.
All right. Meanwhile, Gallup has this morning has Trump at 41% approval. So remember, 41% approval for Trump, which is where he's at in the aggregate, is losing. Right. Don't freak out that he's not at 35. He's getting clobbered at 41.
I see. Well, I like collaboration.
That's what we're doing.
Yes.
All of us are getting together and we're doing a collaboration.
Yes, once we all get together.
We all get together and
clobber somebody. That's collaboration. That's my
it's a new term.
Trademark.
TM.
Send money.
Right?
Yeah.
So, U.S. Senate, Michigan, Peters plus 17 in a Redfield and Wilton strategies poll. Arizona, Kelly plus 18, and North Carolina, Cunningham plus 11. So that's why Trump is tweeting this morning, maybe we should delay the election.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea for him.
Because if it were right now,
if the election were held today,
an advanced collaboration throughout the entire country.
Right. Excellent. It would be fantastic. We've been asking
for the election
to be held today ever since the pollsters started hinting that it could happen. I keep jumping on it, but so far no one's been able to do it.
Right. I am not a lawyer, and I don't, play with these sorts of things, but I never really understood what the difference was between the TM and the little circle C with a circle around it.
Yes. Oh,
Either way, you're not supposed to use it without permission.
Right. True. The R is the registered trademark. A trademark. TM is just a claimed trademark. May also be registered, but the R is the registered, and the C is copyright. Of course, that's a totally different body of law.
Yeah. R is for ridiculous.
Right. Sure. And when you circle it, it's just, I don't know what.
It goes down the drain. Nobody's going to look, I mean, the badness here is actually, we're making fun of it, but it's really a terrible morning in terms of news. I mean, the economy is just incredible.
Oh, yeah, we're doomed.
Incredibly bad, right? Remember, everything Larry Kudlow says is wrong, and you're always not going to make money if you simply bet against him. So the V-shaped recovery, not going to happen. And in fact, this just puts pressure on Mitch McConnell. And I still see people on cable news saying, well, the canny Mitch McConnell, who's the master of this, is going to do X, Y. He doesn't have a clue as to what's going on. The only thing that's potentially going to come out of this is the breaking of the Senate version of the Hastert rule. No, I don't mean about molesting kids. I mean, if your entire conference can't come up with a majority vote to pass something, then you're going to have to do it with, I should whisper this, the other party.
Oh, all right.
So it's Democrats plus a couple of recalcitrant Republicans, and they're recalcitrant because they're probably running for election, and that's how you get over 50.
We'll accept the temporary partnerships and collaboration.
Yeah, that's what collaboration is. Because, I mean, the House already has a $3 trillion bill passed.
All right.
All they'd have to do is pass that, and they're done. Now, Republicans don't want to do that because it's a Democratic bill. It's a Democrat bill in their eye.
Right.
But with the economic news coming this morning, I am unsure whether that's going to hold.
Well, I've never really seen them bend to reality before, but
But you have a dual reality here. It's not just the bad news; it's the fact that they don't have the votes to do anything else.
Oh.
And the people who are running can't afford to do nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
How is Susan Collins going to go back to Maine and say, "Listen, none of you are getting any money"? Because imagine how big the deficit's going to be in a couple of years.
Yes, right. That's bad.
That's not going to fly.
No.
You don't need polls to know that. But the polls will support that it's not going to fly.
Okay, well then we'll have proof, and we'll just be guessing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's important. I don't know. I think there's a lot of people up in Maine who might say, I don't need any money or anything or have to survive. It's possible. There are very different people in Maine.
Yeah, well.
They could just go in the ocean and get lobster. What's the problem?
They're the same as you.
Walk out there and get it. Yeah, okay. Well,
you got to put gasoline in those boats to go out and get them lobsters.
Or parade around with Trump flags if that's what you're interested in doing.
Well, I don't think those boaters are the boating community that's supporting Trump.
No. Well, no.
Those aren't pleasure boats. Those are working boats.
Right. Okay.
From working people.
Yes.
Who would like to be working anyway.
Well, yeah, that's true. No one's unemployed the lobster guys. They just...
the economy's tanking, so the lobster price fell out, and they're hurting.
True, but they're still
it's one of the reasons why Susan Collins is in trouble, and why Biden is actually leading in Maine 2, which is lobster country.
Maine 2, Maine
1.
District 2, not Maine also, but yes. But that too, statewide, I'm sure.
Maine 1, is Portland. It's Bill Portland, Maine country, and it's pretty solid Biden.
So
but Maine 2 is much more rural. And was a much closer election in 2016, but there's actually a poll of Maine 2, and it's leading Biden.
Okay, well that is good news then. It's a pretty rare thing, I think.
We need more polls.
Yes, but everyone's unemployed, so we can't do it or something.
Well, they have time to do it, right?
Well, they have time to answer, but all of our pollsters are unemployed. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I think they're still working. Well, we'll find out if they fill their time. They should. This is a unique opportunity to poll in places where they might ordinarily not do so. And then it would boost the economy or something, and we'd have a V-shaped recovery. It's really their duty to do it, quite honestly. And pollsters who aren't conducting polls right now are anti-American.
Well, I just think that they should poll because I want to know the answer.
Okay.
That's a good enough reason.
Bill tells me they can't just walk out and get the lobsters anymore because they had a shark attack. They did. I saw that in Maine. They had a shark attack just the other day.
But they're in boats. They don't just walk out and get the lobsters.
I thought you just walk out there. You just jump right in.
Well, maybe they do in southern Maine. In northern Maine, they actually get in boats and they go out in the water.
All right. Well, I've seen the little floats that they have, and I assumed that they were using some boats somewhere. But really, lobsters should just be crawling right up into your plate. So it's nice and easy. This is the bounty of America here. I don't understand why these lobsters are hiding.
The lobstermen tend to vote Republican, but not this year. But I still have a soft spot for them. I spent some time on Little Cranberry Island up in the Mount Desert Island area, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people.
Okay.
And they're pissed, just like the rest of the country. So, again, the economic news, the numbers are simply a reflection of the gestalt, the whole zeitgeist of what's going on here.
Wow. Very German.
Very German.
Okay. Well,
I don't speak German, but I know a few people who do.
Right. And did they tell you how to pronounce those?
Yeah, and I got it wrong anyway.
Well, okay. What else is
I'm still working on Angela Merkel. So what else?
I think you got that right.
Here's a Bloomberg report here. U.S. jobless claims rise the second week in sign of growing risks. The number of Americans filing for unemployment benefits increased for a second straight week, a sign the economic rebound is increasingly at risk, with Congress poised to potentially let supplemental $600 payments expire. Initial claims through regular state programs rose to 1.43 million in the week ended July 25th, up 12,000 from the prior week. That's 2 weeks in a row that unemployment benefit filings have gone up.
Okay.
There were 17 million Americans filing for ongoing benefits through these programs in the period ended July 18, and that's the largest increase since early May from the prior week.
Okay.
And that's not good.
No. And lobster.
Right.
I forget how that's connected, but...
Well, everybody wants to work. The whole idea, again, this goes back, I would say, to one of our favorite side discussions. It's the Colin Woodard idea of the different 11 nations in the U.S. and Tidewater. Right. I keep fixing on Tidewater, which you don't quite live in.
No.
But having been founded by the younger sons of British landowners, and then further south, the Deep South, which was basically founded by plantation owners from the Caribbean, pirates of the Caribbean coming and starting a country. And their basic theory is that it's just anathema to pay people not to work. We own these people. They're supposed to work for us. And to actually pay them not to is against everything we stand for. And I just keep thinking about that when I look at the Republican Party and their whole reaction to increasing unemployment benefits. They treat it as like, a moral aversion. It's got nothing to do with practicality.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need it. We're only doing it because we have to. But by God, the whole idea of paying people at all,
yes, well, that's
let alone
true.
not to work, it's just like horrible. You're not supposed to pay people. They're just supposed to work for you.
That's the
so
heritage.
They can support your lifestyle.
Right. So exactly right. See, when they talk about their heritage, this flag represents my heritage, in which we don't pay people for anything. They work, but we don't pay them. We own them. That's
that's the mindset.
Yeah.
And so it's just pervasive in the Republican Party, and it really, why else would they be fighting this? It's so obvious you have to do it. And MEP Fuller's right. They don't get the urgency. They don't get the big picture. And even if they did, it wouldn't move them because they don't want to, because it would mean acknowledging that people ought to be paid a fair wage. And they're just not into that.
No, yeah, that bothers them a great deal, and they can always go to a prosperity gospel church who will tell them that it's God's will that it go this way, and the reason you have money even though you don't do anything, and those people don't have money even though they're working for you, is God favors you. Oh,
speaking of God's will, we got this guy, Mark Curran, who's running against Illinois Democrat, Dave, name escaping me.
Okay, where are we?
Illinois Senate.
Illinois Senate.
High-ranking Democrat.
Durbin?
Dave Durbin.
Dick Durbin.
Dick Durbin. There you go. Dick Durbin, who's been pretty invisible this year. But he's got a challenger. His name is Mark Curran, or as he calls himself on Twitter, former Sheriff Mark Curran.
Oh, is that who? Oh, I didn't realize he was from Illinois. Okay.
Yeah.
Because who cares about that guy? But okay, yes.
And Illinois apparently is closing down fall sports.
Okay.
So this candidate for Senate writes on Twitter, "My son found out today about his upcoming football season. My thoughts? The devil is about fear and isolation. Does he own you? How much more of my son's childhood are we going to steal? Death will eventually come for everybody. Your soul will have an eternal destination. When we begin to realize the truth, we'll move beyond irrational measures that tell our young people, quote, their lives are irrelevant, end quote. What can we expect from youth? We can expect a continuing explosion in suicides, opiate deaths, and gang violence.
What?
I guess we reap what we sow in Illinois." So he's basically saying, if you don't let my kid play football, terrible things are going to happen to Illinois youth.
I guess. And
then he goes on to say, some people, especially Democrats, seem confused by this thread. It's simple.
Confused by this thread.
Faithful folks don't fear death because we believe in the afterlife. How long are we going to allow fear over COVID-19 to control our lives? Wisconsin and Indiana are having fall sports. Narrator voice.
Are they?
For now.
Okay.
Why can't we?
I don't know. Well,
Death will come for everybody. I mean, that's a great slogan, right? Trump 2020. Sure. Death comes for us all.
It's, it's got a certain finality to it, and people like closure. So I suppose death for all is might not be a bad idea.
But again, it's like the approach that the Republicans are taking to the unemployment insurance crisis. So you have this big pandemic crisis, and it's not going the way people want by wishing it away or praying it away. And so the reaction is, well, damn it, if it's not going the way I want, we all have to die anyway, so just do it anyway.
Right. And you could start your own football league. There's no reason to wait for the school football league, and no reason why you can't do it. Don't give me expense. Just play without helmets the way they used to. And if you're worried about the consequences, death comes for us all.
Yeah, something along those lines.
But they like dressing up in football costume. So
right. So, it's a pretty good slogan. And I think that the Republicans on the whole seem to be adopting it. I have to say that America on the whole isn't buying it, and they don't really want that. And that's why the polls look the way they do.
Oh. How's Curran doing in the polls? I didn't even realize he was running, so I guess that's...
Dick Durbin is going to lose. I haven't seen a poll. Don't need to.
Yeah, they're just not looking, so...
Even if I can't remember
I don't know what the
his name,
devil...
I'm not from Indiana or Illinois.
Right, or any I state. Where I think you can vote in any state that begins with I.
Or what was the other one? Minnesota? All the other places that are playing football?
Oh, yeah. Wisconsin was one of them, probably. I don't know. Did he mention?
Wisconsin and Indiana are having fall sports. Why can't we? Why can't we have nice things?
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, we charged out guns blazing. Death comes for us all. And, guns are one way that it comes for us all, but COVID is another. And right. I guess they're not concerned about it among the young football playing, or they wish they were football playing kids in Illinois. But I guess death has come for one guy. You were just telling me, Turning Point USA co-founder, not Charlie Kirk. It was
Charlie Kirk is one of the co-founders. The other guy is Bill Montgomery, who was in his 80s, 80 years old, I think. Okay, and he started the pro-Trump student group along with Kirk. Wow. And Bill Montgomery got COVID-19 and died.
Wow. Now was he the money guy, I guess?
I don't know.
It doesn't really say. I mean, what would
mentor, senior guy? I don't know.
Why would an 80-year-old
I always see. I was telling David they always abbreviate this TP USA, so I assume that's toilet paper.
That's I don't know any other TP.
And I don't really look into their mechanics and their financial records all that deeply. But I do know that while the co-founder died, Charlie Kirk is still saying it's all a hoax and I'm never wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Which I think is rather youthfully callous.
Yeah, maybe he killed him.
I wouldn't go far as to say that. It would be irresponsible not to speculate, but I don't think so.
But maybe.
I
don't want to say it without foundation, but maybe he killed him.
I don't know how many people have to get sick and die before people realize it's not a hoax, but sometimes it just has to strike closer to home. Yes. Apparently in Charlie Kirk's case, not close enough because he still doesn't get it.
Yeah, although now
Meanwhile,
he's
Mark Murray tweets, paging the
guy
Alan
in charge.
Abramowitz election model, which sees the second quarter GDP numbers being a big deal in predicting the outcome of a presidential contest.
Yeah, maybe.
Harry Anton says, I don't know if that's going to hold this year. And I'm thinking to myself, but what if it does?
You are entitled to ask that, I think. Or maybe it could be just a gimme-tarian thing. Only they get to ask it. But
yeah, I don't know. But, maybe the bad GDP numbers actually mean something. And maybe that's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this election.
Yeah. Well, I'm still preoccupied by the Toilet Paper USA people.
Yeah, well,
I'm wondering, does he
anything in this
any
political
money?
story more?
Kirk?
Montgomery, who started it in 2012 with young conservative star Charlie Kirk, died at the age of 80 on Tuesday from COVID-19, according to pro-Trump conservative strategist Caleb Hull, who posted about the death on Twitter and his personal Facebook page. I really wish people would just stop politicizing this pandemic and grow up while innocent people around us are dying, Hull said. You have no idea how painful it is to be forced to sit at home while your loved one dies alone in a hospital.
Did he love Montgomery?
I mean, everything he just said is true.
Yes.
Okay.
Why is he saying
that? Charlie Kirk is saddened by the death of my dear friend Bill Montgomery, but he still won't wear a mask.
Yes. Well, my other question is, does he inherit the full leadership of Turning Point USA or something, or is there money for the organization that he comes into now? I'm a little
Follow the
curious.
money? I don't know. I can't.
He doesn't wear a mask, and he hangs out with an 80-year-old guy, and then the 80-year-old guy got COVID and died, and now he's in charge of this thing. Well, I don't know. I mean, that sounds like means and motive to me. But
yeah, if we still had reporters who had a job, we could ask them to follow that up.
Right. Well, they've all pivoted to video, so.
Yeah. We can ask a blogger to do it. We don't get paid.
Right, that's true. We're like, this is why you think I'm still in the Tidewater, because I'm working without getting paid.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it all comes together very neatly.
I know you're only near Tidewater.
Yes, well, I only get paid a little. So
are you in Appalachia? I forgot.
Yeah, I think they count our county as Appalachia.
Well, that explains everything.
Yeah, I mean, yeehaw is what I meant to say.
Who's your representative?
Texas. My representative is not Appalachian at all, but Jennifer Wexton is my representative.
Jennifer Wexton?
Yes. Right.
She going to win re-election?
Yeah, I would think so. I'm not even certain who the Republican candidate against her is, so that's usually a good sign.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the problem. They were complaining, a big story on Washington Post about that. They're very unhappy because they can't campaign the way they'd like to.
Yeah.
What's happening is that the pandemic is curtailing their entire style. And so the Senate Republicans are really upset that they may lose the Senate because they can't do the things they normally do. They think that nobody in the Democratic Party is qualified to run against them.
Yeah.
And because of the pandemic, they're all doing the Joe Biden in the basement thing. And whereas the senators, the Republican senators, have to go back and, do stuff in Washington every day, and they get interviewed every day, and they look bad, but they don't have the opportunity to make the Democrats look bad, and so it's hurting them. And this is why, forget about the substance of what they should be doing. This is why these visuals, these optics, are why the Republicans are losing the Senate. And what they're especially unhappy about is the tried and true Republican method of getting elected, which isn't, to be fair, completely Republican. Democrats do it too. They can't send the young staffers to stalk their opponents all day for that 8-second soundbite that they could put on social media that makes them look awkward. The clinging to guns kind of thing that they like to put out there.
Yeah. But they can't.
And so they can't do that because, you can't really go out and do stuff, and they're not doing stuff. They're not having these open activities with lots of people where they like to go and take these videos and then, slice and dice them and then put them up in a misleading way and then say, look, my opponent's not qualified. Look what they said.
Can't they just edit the, capture
if they edit it selectively, then you get the words, I like the devil. You can't vote for this, But they can't do that now. They're like totally limited. And I read that story and thought, 'tis an ill wind that blows nobody any good. At least something good is coming out of this pandemic.
I guess.
Because they can't do that.
I guess not. But
I mean, what a way to elect people. But that's our country. That's what we do.
Well, we have gotten used to that. But they can't, if they're beaming out live streams from their basement, they can't just record those and edit those.
Well, it's not the same. It's not that confronting
feel,
live with something that somebody said. Let's see if I can find the exact quote somewhere here. I had it.
All right.
It was there. It's gone. So I don't have it now.
Well,
but
I believe it
it mentioned that. Oh, here it is. The election season has not yet had a single big quote tracker end quote controversy involving those usually young staffers who follow opposing candidates from event to event, hoping to capture them on camera doing or saying something controversial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And that actually comes from this article that I actually found called As Pandemic Limits Scrutiny, GOP fears lesser-known Democratic candidates will steamroll to Senate majority.
Okay.
I mean, they're telling themselves. It's got nothing to do with the substance of what they vote for or what they believe or what they – it can't be that. Because we're absolutely right about it. It's got to be the optics. So therefore, the pandemic is going to make us lose, not because we're doing anything wrong.
Right, but because
people naturally love us no matter what we do. It's because lesser-known Democratic candidates don't have the chance to be destroyed by, sleazy campaign ads, as if campaigns actually win or lose things. That's a conceit that people in Washington have.
Yes.
But it's really fundamentals that do. I mean, the pandemic is going to destroy the Republicans. It's not because the Democrats are running such a wonderful campaign that they just steamroll the Republicans. It's reality. It's the economy. It's the pandemic. It's schools and what we're going to do with that. And, of course, they don't see it that way at all. My job is to get elected and then reelected by hiring campaign people with, trackers that'll make my opponent look bad.
Yes. Okay, I can see why
Stop bothering me with all this substantive stuff. I don't have time for that.
Yeah. All right.
It's not why I'm here anyway.
Yeah, I guess it's a theory you can use to divert blame from losing because you've been terrible on policy. I don't know if I buy it, but I don't think that they care. They just want to. It needs to be printed in a newspaper, and then job is done.
We'll see. So the article makes this claim. In Iowa, Joni Ernst has challenged her Democratic competitor to 6 debates, starting in August. Tom Tillis pressed his Democratic opponent for 5 debates. Yeah. And in Maine, Susan Collins wants to debate her opponent 16 times.
Sure.
Right. In each of the state's counties, starting immediately. Now, Republicans acknowledge this upends the usual debate about debates, in which an incumbent rarely wants to give the challenger the same platform.
Right.
But now incumbent senators are pleading with their lesser-known rivals to join them on debate stages or Zoom, trying to elevate the profile of these Democrats, and they view this as a matter of necessity in a campaign in which Republicans are running into the headwinds of President Trump's sagging poll numbers amid his stumbling response to the coronavirus pandemic.
I wonder if what's happening...
And then the line about, not having the trackers.
Yeah. So I get the tracker thing. I wonder if maybe another way of explaining it is like you have explained before. See, you still get to be right in this. The difficulty with not having so many public events, and I guess maybe they think the Democrats are more likely to stumble and provide the footage that they want in public settings where they can be challenged or have to answer unexpected questions, or they can plant questions or what have you. And under controlled circumstances, live streaming things out from their basement or whatever, there's less likelihood of that happening. Of course, they don't even have to do it live. They can record it and make sure that they don't say anything crazy or stupid. So that might lessen their chances there. But with fewer campaign events happening and fewer tracker moments, therefore, happening, each of these Democrats benefit from what Biden is benefiting from. Incumbent Republicans are having to defend their seats against essentially generic Democrats. They have a name, but everything about them is generic because they're unknown. All I know is that this person is against that orange guy, and that actually is good enough for me right now.
Right? No, that's true. So to put it in words, this is Jesse Hunt, spokesman for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. The more voters see their candidates, the worse off they are. This is a very weak crop of recruits.
Okay.
So they think that they're voting for them, the obviously senatorial-looking person, versus the Democrat who's like this nothing person. How dare you even challenge me? That was the attitude that Joni Ernst had when she saw that her polls were like even. She was furious. How could this be? Whereas Democrats, according to the article, say their candidates are focused on the right issue at the right moment, protecting and enhancing health care during pandemics, for example, as GOP incumbents adopt the tactics of traditionally deployed by losing candidates, which is demanding more debates.
That's what usually happens. Okay.
Right, and then the only poll that matters is Election Day.
Right. That's next.
Well, that's already happened with Mike Pence. He already said that.
Oh, yes, right. He did go to that early.
Right. So that puts into perspective the whole thing about, Trump having been hit with the reality this morning that the economy's tanking and he's losing. So therefore he wants to delay the election.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's it's a tactic.
It's interesting because the Washington Post, like most Washington-based newspapers, are tilted Republican just as a bias. It's not a lot, but it's the subtle things. Whatever the president says has to be treated as a presidential statement, therefore seriously. The Republicans are clearly the party of serious foreign policy. That kind of stuff. It's like built into everything that they do.
Yeah.
And obviously the Republican is the Republicans run the Senate because that's the way things are. And so if something's happening that makes the Democrats likely to win, well, we have to explain that.
Yeah.
Can't be like quality.
No.
Can't be policy.
An insider's view of how this is happening. And it's usually campaign consultants can explain it. I'll talk to them.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll answer the phone at least.
Right. Well, that's true. That is an interesting built-in bias. I don't even necessarily see that part of it as consciously anti-democratic.
Right. It's not conscious. Exactly. It's just like, everybody knows this.
Yeah. That is ingrained in most reporting, both parts of it. And I think
Lindsey Graham is a serious senator with serious ideas about foreign policy and other things.
And there's no reason to believe that he is. But I don't know. People say that he is.
I get it when they said that about McCain. I never understood it about Lieberman. It ain't true about Lindsey.
No. Lindsey Graham, well, he holds himself out that way. I've never understood it as Lieberman. Lieberman, I guess, claimed it, but there was really nothing. Yeah, but nobody believed it.
Nobody in Connecticut believed it either.
Oh, well, that's important if you want to stay in the Senate. All right. Well, that's one way of explaining things, I guess. It's just consultant culture, and they like it a lot. And reporters like it a lot because you can get verbiage for your columns without leaving your desk. You can call a person and get words from an important name who wears suits and that you have a file photo of if necessary, and there's your story, as opposed to it's very hard to figure out what people are thinking. You have to talk to a lot of them, and there are only so many diners I can go to, what have you, and I have deadline. So, yeah, I guess that's part of the bias too, right? I have until 6 o'clock to write this thing. I can't interview 1,000 people and get statistically significant answers in this district that's halfway across the country. But I do have the phone numbers from people who are professionally qualified, you put that in scare quotes, to give me an explanation of what's happening there. And but because I am a reporter and I know that one of them will be biased toward one candidate, I will call the other one and get their biased opinion about the other candidate and put them together. And that, I think, is 800 words. And gosh, it's time to go.
Yeah, I'm done.
All right.
So I'm going to end with this very interesting op-ed in the New York Times yesterday by Stuart Stevens, Republican political consultant, somebody who worked on Romney's campaign, entitled, "We lost the battle for the Republican Party's soul long ago. Only fear will motivate the party to change. The cold fear only defeat can bring." And the illustrative picture from Reuters is a good one. It's got a Trump 2020 Keep America Great sign, and next to it is a Confederate battle flag with the added words, "I ain't coming down." Funny thing is, yeah, you are. It's already down in South Carolina. It's down in Mississippi. It's down with NASCAR. It's coming down.
Yeah, I wonder where this picture was taken. Just curious, but all right. He says this one here on private property. He says, ain't coming down.
That's fine. So Stuart Stevens writes, after Mitt Romney lost the 2012 presidential race, he reminds us that the Reince Priebus commission and internal party study, the autopsy, everybody ignored it. And then Donald Trump emerged, and the party threw all these conclusions out the window with an almost audible sigh of relief. Thank God we can win without pretending we really care about this stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
And Stuart Stevens says, I spent decades in the Republican Party. I saw the warning signs, but ignored them and chose to believe what I wanted to believe. The party wasn't just a white grievance party. There's still a big tent. The other guys were worse. Many of us in the party saw this dark side and told ourselves it was a recessive gene. We were wrong. Turned out to be the dominant gene.
Too bad. I mean, I would have liked to have believed that too, I guess, if I were him.
Yeah. So, he talks about how did it happen? How do you abandon deeply held beliefs about character? You don't. The obvious answer is these beliefs weren't deeply held.
Yeah. And his idea of
they
character
said, just look
wasn't
at
the
deficit peacocks, as Joan likes to call them, Joe McCarter.
Right.
They're not deeply held beliefs. They're beliefs that if Democrats are in power, you shouldn't be spending money.
Yeah.
But if Republicans are in power, spend as much as you need.
Deficits don't matter.
Especially to shore up votes with Republican constituencies, like, I don't know, farmers in Iowa.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Spend as much as you want. There's no such thing as a deficit.
Right. Defense spending usually fits in that category as well. Even if you don't have a huge defense contingent in your district, you got a district full of people who, are conditioned to say, oh, yeah. Right, absolutely. Military spending is fantastic. It's good because we have to defend ourselves against the Russians, unless we have to do whatever the Russians say, in which case we could have done that on the cheap. But the point is something USA.
Well, again, he reminds us that the Republican Party has only won the popular vote one time since 1988.
They are not popular.
The election should signal a day of reckoning for the party and all who claim it as a political identity. Will it? I've given up hope that there are any lines of decency or normalcy that once crossed would move Republican leaders to act as if they took their oath of office more seriously than their allegiance to party. Just look at what the Senate is doing right now, for example. Only fear will motivate the party to change. The cold fear only defeat can bring, and that defeat is looming. Will it bring desperately needed change to the Republican Party? I'd like to say I'm hopeful, but that would be a lie, and there's been too many lies for too long. So I agree with him. I don't think you can reform the Republican Party. I think you just have to destroy it. That doesn't mean conservatism will disappear. Hopefully it will just reappear in some other form. But parties aren't forever, and people who think they are just because that's the way it's always been are generally wrong.
Right, and it hasn't always been that way. Yeah, always is rarely true. Yeah, anything that you think has always been there.
Yeah, interview that head of the Whig Party and see what he thinks.
Right, true. I mean, it's the newest major party by far. It's not that old. It's well, you remember that whole thing, the Civil War. You're trying to have another one, and you have monuments to it and all that, right? And we can't get rid of it. That's interesting, right? We can't hide our heritage. How will people know their history? The Republican Party has been here forever. It hasn't.
Well, study a little history and it gets confusing, right? Because then you have to figure out who the Democratic Republicans were.
Yes.
There was a party named that.
That's true. Yeah, and Whig as well, like as you pointed out. But the Whig is funnier sounding. But
yeah.
Democratic Republican, that probably does sound funnier now to us because we don't understand how those two names could be put together. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. It's an interesting article. Of course, we should probably point out, as many people are probably pointing out in their own heads, Stuart Stevens made a lot of money for a long time pretending that this stuff wasn't true about Republicans, but it was. I guess he's sort of admitting he had it wrong the whole time.
Deathbed conversion.
Still, yeah, right. Okay,
so does it count as much as converting when you're 18? No, but it's something.
We'll take it. It's an interesting point of conversation. It hurts Republican chances now, and that's it. That's the end of my interest in it. So
well, that's it.
A good article. We read it, and I don't have to give him any money.
Yeah. So I said what I had to say, and I don't have to say anything more.
That's right.
So I'll wind up seeing you on Monday, but yes. I will say this, there's a bunch of states that are still, pandemic-wise, really worthy of following. I gave you some pictures.
Let's look.
The confirmed cases per day by U.S. states and territories. Florida, Arizona, Texas, California are all plateauing, but they're not dropping.
Right.
And that's bad. And the deaths are also plateauing. They're rising in Florida and Texas. They're plateauing in Arizona and still rising a little bit in California.
Yeah.
And that's not good. And there's other states, Louisiana, South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama. They really have to be added to the watch list because things are not going there. And on the whole, cases per day normalized by population for the U.S. Has plateaued for the last 2 weeks. It's really not dropping. And so this pandemic is not under control, and that's why the economy is tanking. And you cannot get the economy fixed until you get the pandemic under control. So I, reluctantly have to say I think the whole country should shut down for 2 weeks.
All right. Well, I'm for that. I thought we had a good time with Saturday Night Live at home. I think they should bring that back. We should coordinate our shutdown with the beginning of the new television season, which is probably
about 2 weeks and come back with wearing masks. Just do that.
Yeah, as if nothing had ever been different. Yeah, I've been watching all these states, but I've been watching them in forms of daily numbers. But graphs with graphs help illustrate the trend. You don't have to sit there and look at every day's numbers and count. But yeah, I mean, there's a real point in putting out these daily new reports of numbers. I was asked that last night. Well, what's the point of these things? And I've never been asked that before. What's the point of checking what's happening and then tracking it over time? But you never know.
Good. So a dump truck has decided to go down my street, and Abby is letting us know there's a dump truck going down.
Excellent. What's it carrying?
Dump.
Yeah.
It looks like somebody's driveway's getting worked on.
Okay. Well, we'll watch that.
Abby gets very upset when people on the block do stuff like that, and they don't check in with her.
She's very conservative.
Supervising, yeah.
In that sense, and so
she doesn't want to spend the money.
Right. She should be over there barking them about deficits.
Right.
Send her over, and we'll wait to hear about her report on Monday.
Definite deficit hound.
That's right. Yeah, a new term that makes a lot more sense.
DMTM. All right. Take care, and I will talk to you on Monday.
Yes, excellent. Don't run out of TP, USA.
Yeah, and try to survive till then.
Right. Excellent. Thanks, Greg. We'll talk to you then, and we'll make up everything between now and then and wait for you to get back with some facts later on. All right. Let's see. Other news or other comments that we can include in the news. Of course, there is Ricky, the Kanakistani, pointing out from all the way up in Prince Edward Island, from which I think she has not been allowed to escape for some time by the Canadian government. But then again, they're doing much better with the virus as a result. Pointing out that, yes, lobster fishermen lost money this year because, of course, there was no market for their catch. There was. We were all just waiting at home. They just needed to do curbside delivery, and that's very difficult to do with steamed lobsters. And but at least they're not unemployed. The real point wasn't that they weren't losing money. We're all losing money. It's just that you're not technically unemployed. I could go fish for. I'm just using the Republican view of things here. We don't have to send you any assistance. You're not unemployed. Those lobsters haven't gone anywhere. Just go get them. Well, what am I supposed to do with them once I catch them? That's your job. I'm not the one that sells lobster for a living. That's you. I'm not going to lobster-splain to you. I don't know. I'm making this up now. What you're supposed to do with your catch once you get it. But we don't have to give you money. The point is the lobsters are still there. You can still go get them. That's the end of my responsibility. There will be no relief for you. Unless, of course, you are it's totally different if you're a farmer and you're growing soybeans and the soybeans are still there. There's no one to sell them to. That's totally different because I can swing the electoral college outcome of your state by giving you money. And I can't swing the electoral outcome of Maine by giving lobstermen money. So I'm not going to do it. I guess that's what it comes down to in the end. Mighty OCD pointing out that, I don't know, he's coming to the defense, ostensibly. I don't think he thinks that that's what he's doing. Coming to the defense of Charlie Kirk on the murder rap for the death of Bill Montgomery, because Charlie Kirk was already largely in charge of Toilet Paper USA. And I believe that that's the case because I had never heard Bill Montgomery's name before. So that was pretty strong evidence that Kirk was the one in charge there. But I guess I don't know, does the article even really go into it? What is almost certainly happening here when a nearly 80-year-old founds a student conservative group with a young, almost student age. He's a little too old for it, Kirk is, but he was younger when he started. An almost student age conservative leader. The two of them come together to co-found something that immediately gets national attention. What's happening here is you've got a student age leader with no money, and he can't be heard in policy circles or in political circles without a tremendous amount of money behind him to pay for public relations. And that's where Bill Montgomery comes in. And the two of them got together. Now, OCD also, mighty OCD, not just any regular OCD. It's not my own OCD telling me this. That he was largely, he was enough in control of the group that he was able to give himself, for instance, a pay raise to $300,000 a year for such pronouncements as the virus is a hoax and you don't need masks, which isn't even anything he made up with his $300,000 mind. But in other words, he controlled his destiny and his own funding enough that he didn't necessarily have to kill Bill Montgomery in order to get control of a larger amount of funds. But it's still a possibility, and one which he now readily concedes, saying, no, I'm pretty sure he killed him. So, good. I'm glad we came around to that. It will... he'll be able to argue in his defense that he didn't need to kill Montgomery in order to give himself a fairly significant salary. But why stop at $300,000? Why not grab the whole bunch? If there was any money left in Montgomery's will that was going to the group, he might be able to grab it all up now before he ends up looking like he's too old to be leading a student group. All right, and Ricky reminds us, of course, there's no such thing as student age. I was a student at 40. Well, we're all students of life, Ricky. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on. Lots to read through here, and also lots that we can turn to, both on Twitter and in our pocket list, plus, of course, the contribution I still have, and maybe we can roll that. Now would be a good time to do it. I was thinking about saving it for tomorrow and producing a pre-recorded show, but I'm thinking I'm going to be running low on time today. And if I don't finish the other hour and 50 minutes of the show, then I won't be able to include Darwin's reading of this Stars and Stripes piece. And maybe the best thing to do to guarantee that it gets some airtime is to roll it now. And at the beginning of the segment, there could be no better time. That guarantees us plenty of margin to get through it without interruptions. So let's do that. Darwin Darko, our friend who frequently brings us, I think we should call him our military correspondent at this point. He's got, it's not a singular focus, but a very helpful focus on issues in the military. Very helpful in bringing us some good information during the USS Teddy Roosevelt crisis, which we never really did find out how that ended and whether or not the captain had ever been reinstated. They kept saying that he would likely be reinstated. I should see. Well, maybe in the next 10 minutes we can follow up and find out. Let's roll Darwin's read here. Let me grab the article here so that it's available for our review here. Recent West Point grads reveal racist incidents at academy.
Got a piece here in Stars and Stripes, July 17th by Corey Dickstein, entitled West Point is Failing. Recent graduates reveal racist incidents at the academy. It's apropos to have an article like this right now, especially with all the social unrest going around the country. A lot of people like to think that the military doesn't see color, but it's just an extension of the rest of society. If the pool of people that you're choosing from have certain biases or sentiments about race, then, it's going to inevitably infiltrate your institution. And so he begins. Recent U.S. Military Academy graduates employed leaders at the West Point, New York institution to strongly condemn racism and institute a zero-tolerance policy in a letter that revealed some of them were victims of racist acts while attending the school. In the June 25th letter, the West Point and Army leaders, 9 graduates of the Academy from 2018-2019, including the top-ranking cadets and graduates from both classes, condemned racism at their alma mater and urged leaders to introduce a curriculum meant to address race and diversity directly. The now Army lieutenant in a 40-page policy proposal, including, they wrote a 40-page proposal with a letter, documented such racist incidents, including a noose left on a black cadet's desk as a joke by a white roommate, a top cadet leader's photo altered to portray her as a monkey, and reports that dozens of black cadets subjected to racial slurs by their classmates in recent years. West Point has demonstrated an inability to meaningfully discuss race and tendency to silence such conversations when grassroots efforts attempt to start them. The West Point graduates wrote in this letter that has been distributed via social media, not only should we be concerned that West Point graduates arrive at their units unprepared to have conversations about race, we should also be concerned that West Point's inability to do so means that it is far easier for racist beliefs to be maintained throughout the academy, to the extent that West Point graduates are tying nooses and joking they can be used on their black peers. The policy proposal calls for West Point leaders to take special steps to address systemic racism that continues to exist at West Point, and for the institution to teach anti-racism and provide space specifically for minority cadets on the campus. By failing in these areas, West Point ultimately fails to produce leaders of character equipped to lead diverse organizations. In other words, West Point is failing. West Point is failing to accomplish its mission. The authors asked West Point leaders to take a stronger public stance against racism, voice support for Black Lives Matter movement, investigate any racial disparities in its disciplinary system, hire a full-time diversity chairperson, and publish 20 years of climate surveys that details issues cadets report anonymously about their units. These climate surveys, some of you folks may be aware of in your own workplaces, where it's anonymous and they poll everybody. Hey, what do you think about the organization? And I myself, when I fill these things out, I fill them out as honest as I can, but you never really think that there's gonna be full systemic change for the things that you voice. But I digress. I'll also move on a little bit here. So the proposal also calls for a commission to study whether to contextualize or remove other symbols of depictions of slavery, the Confederacy, and white supremacy at West Point. Army Lieutenant General Darrell Williams, the West Point superintendent, denied last month to USA Today that systemic racism exists at the academy. Williams, a 1983 West Point grad, became the school's first black superintendent in 2018. West Point officials said that academy leaders had received the letter and policy proposal, and the school's inspector general had begun a comprehensive review of all matters involving race at the academy. The academy expects all cadets to be treated with dignity and respect. We take seriously all forms of racial inequality that marginalize or devalue members of our team. That was from Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Opart, a West Point spokesman. West Point does not accept, condone, or promote racism. But the authors of the letter, who include white and black alumni, argued black cadets' assertions of racist incidents went ignored and that in at least some cases, blacks faced harsher punishment for minor violations than their white counterparts. Army First Lieutenant Simone Askew, one of the authors, detailed an act of racism that she faced just after she was named the first black female top cadet in West Point's history in 2017. She wrote that she came back to her dorm room one evening to find a photo of her altered with a monkey over her face. Though I was unaware of the historical precedents of portraying black people as monkeys, I wondered if the depiction suggests, though I was aware. I'm sorry, I thought I said, though I was unaware. She was aware about, the historical context of this type of thing, and she wondered if the depiction suggested something deeper about her leadership, she wrote in the policy proposal. Racing through my mind were all the presentations and conversations that I had given in the past 14 days. Did I make any mistakes? She's wondering, she's doubting herself here. Why would somebody go and deface her picture like that? Askew, a Rhodes Scholar, by the way, wrote the incident left her feeling she could make no mistakes in her leadership. During her senior year, Askew was regularly made available by the Academy for high-profile media engagements. She wrote her experience with racism led her to question what support West Point was providing other minority cadets who were not being paraded by the Academy as a model to follow. Another West Point graduate wrote in the policy that the Academy failed to ready her to respond to civil unrest that spread throughout all 50 states in recent weeks after the May 25th killing of a handcuffed black man in Minneapolis, George Floyd. Moving on a little bit in the article here. The policy proposals authors wrote the proposal was meant as a quick response to a request issued last month by Defense Secretary Mark Esper for service members to provide his office actionable proposals to address racial injustice in the military. Their proposal came as the Army has signaled it is open to a conversation aimed at renaming 10 of its southern installations named for Confederate generals. Legislative proposals introduced in both chambers of Congress aim to strip those posts of these names. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, leaders have signaled they could soon issue an across-the-board ban on the display of Confederate battle flag on military installations. This actually happened already in the Marines. I know that, and I remember I approached some leadership about implementing the same thing across some of the other branches too. The Marine Corps the Marine Corps earlier this year issued such a ban, and the Navy is in the process of implementing its own. Army leaders, I never understood that. Why would you're walk through the logic with me here. You're in the United States military, the united of these states military, and there is a designated symbology of the stars and stripes that we know of with the 50 stars and, the red and white stripes that represents this country. And you have in opposition this other flag, banner that clearly were in opposition to the U.S. Stars and Stripes, the United Stars and Stripes. And you're in the current military and you're flying that other side's flag. It makes no sense. We're at war we're a pseudo war, Cold War forever with Russia. Could you imagine? I go on base sometimes and I see trucks with Confederate flags on them and the American flag on them, both. So I can't imagine seeing an American flag and a Russian flag just flying behind somebody's pickup truck. That makes no sense. The logic doesn't play out. It was an opposition force. They lost. You are designated to the dustbin of history. Why would you're in the military and you're still showing the support for the losing side of a battle. Now, of a war. It's not even like it was just some small skirmish of an epic war. And you're promoting, by flying this flag, you're promoting this other side. He wraps up the article here. The West Point graduates wrote their policy proposal was a call to action, and now is the time for action. To be sure, West Point has come a long way. Askew wrote in the proposal. Nevertheless, the reverence that West Point holds for racist figures is antithetical to the claims it makes about the next generation of Army leaders. If black lives really do matter to the military, then that should be known, and if they do, then that ought to be undoubtedly clear as well. And again, this article was written by Corey Dickstein. He can be found on Twitter at cdicksteindc. I can be found at Darwin_Darko. Thanks for playing my segment, David. Back to you.
Hey, you're welcome. Okay, and thanks for contributing to the segment. It's funny, as you mentioned in there, just as I was listening to the segment again, the obviously good point, and I think that everybody has had this thought, the strange contradiction of serving in the United States military and flying the flag of a defeated enemy of the United States. It never really made any sense, but I don't know. I guess logic was never really what they were after there. It was sort of a gimmitarian approach to things. I want to be able to, I want a sly way of endorsing racism without, having to admit that I'm a racist, because this is about heritage or whatever. And even there are probably even some people for whom, who are ignorant of history and just viewed the Confederate flag as some sort of expression of individualism or something. Right? I'm from the South and we fly this thing. Why do they fly it? Because they missed the days of slavery and legalized discrimination. that followed, but whatever, they just, I don't know whether they just ignore that on purpose or whatever. But you did say, it would be impossible to imagine somebody flying both an American and Russian flag off of the back of their pickup truck. And it reminded me that I have just seen within a couple of days, and I actually found it on Twitter, a photo, shared around the internet by the Twitter friend known as Stone Kettle, just like it sounds, and a picture, I guess, that he took himself. It says, "Took this today in a neighborhood in my town. These are not the brightest people." Now, not exactly what you were talking about, but certainly just as baffling. 2 Trump flags, one in white and one in blue, but they're the same. I don't know. He bought it in 2 colors. It say Trump 2020, and it says no more BS, but spells it all out for you on this flag. I don't know why. Whatever, I don't know if it's the official Trump campaign flag, what have you. Anyway, 2 Trump flags and 1 Russian flag, but not Russian, Soviet flag. The old, red banner with the hammer and sickle and the star and everything. And it's also being, I think, displayed upside down vis-a-vis the Trump flags. They may have I don't know what's going on. I mean, this person, why the Soviet flag? That doesn't make any sense at all. Maybe he thought, Russia's our friend now, didn't have any idea perhaps that they had changed their flag, but it's a newly purchased Soviet flag. You can see the folds are still in it. I noticed that at Charlottesville at the Unite the Right rally, a couple of the people with their Confederate flags with the crease marks in it. They're just right out of the bag. I thought that was kind of interesting. This is my heritage, which I just bought from Amazon.com yesterday. But they may have no idea that Russia changed their flag. They clearly have no idea. They've never seen this Soviet flag displayed. So they got it upside down. It's a little weird, but I guess if there's people that can do this, then there might very well be someone somewhere with an American and Russian flag flying off the back of their pickup trucks on a military base somewhere. I guess it's entirely possible. Anyway, I'm glad to have that update. Thanks, Darwin, for sharing that with us, and a fairly significant and serious issue there. And I guess we can still hold out some hope that the military, at least at the Army, I guess of the branches that have addressed their issues with racial and gender issues, the Army still at the forefront of trying to get it right. I guess the Air Force is the laggard in all this, or at least that's my impression of things. But an excellent point being made by top graduating cadets of the last couple of years. And it's really a unique situation that they face there as minority cadets, for one thing. And there, I think, they have applied to themselves the rule that minority students, black students in particular, have got to perform twice as well just to be taken half as seriously at the academy. And I guess no coincidence then that of late, many of them have graduated with high honors from the academy, tops of their class. I would hope that would mean that they are taken seriously when they make their proposals. So anyway, thank you for updating us on that one. And I'd be willing to hold my breath for a short time to see whether some of those issues are addressed. Whether, obviously don't hold your breath if what you're waiting for is the complete elimination of any trace of racism at West Point or in the armed forces. But I think they're being pretty realistic about what they think they ought to get. And it's a realistic thing, I think, to expect that, your top graduates of the last couple of years who are now commissioned officers in the United States Army should be taken seriously when they comment on this situation. All right, let me run back to back to Pocket, back to the other store of stories that I wanted to share. Although I won't dive all the way back into that Politico article that Greg handed us about Charlie Kirk and Bill Montgomery, but I do recommend that you take some time reading it. Particularly towards the end of the article when they discuss, I guess, not so much the nature of the relationship between some of it is about Bill Montgomery and Kirk and how they met and why Montgomery agreed to back Kirk. And this was kind of surprising. I don't think I knew that this was the case, but apparently when they met and Charlie Kirk was 18, Montgomery, for some reason, becomes convinced that Kirk could and should be elected president of the United States at some point in the future, and therefore he was gonna back him. It was Bill and Charlie's chance encounter in 2012, along with Bill's generosity and willingness to invest in an 18-year-old with no experience and no connections, that gave birth to the dream that would one day become Toilet Paper USA. Turning Point. It is Turning Point. I like Toilet Paper USA much better. This is, according to, I guess, a video produced by, some random jackass who they mention in here, and it's supposed to be an important thing. And it says in this guy's video that one of Montgomery's goals was to get Kirk, a close ally of Donald Trump Jr., elected president one day. Maggio, the producer of the video, called Montgomery a conservative through and through who wore it as a badge of honor. Montgomery is survived by his widow, Edie, and a son and daughter who will no doubt contest for any of the funds that might otherwise have been stolen or absconded with by Charlie Kirk. I don't know whether he's really doing that. I just think it's highly likely, and that you should watch your backs. Okay, anyway, then it goes on to explain that Charlie Kirk was anti-mask, even though the guy that made him just died of COVID. It says here somewhere along, basically the rest of the story is what a giant a-hole Kirk is. I believe, so I guess somebody trying to defend him preemptively against the charges that he effed everything up and killed Bill Montgomery. He says, well, I'm sure Charlie would have recognized that he was in a risk group and would have recommended self-quarantine for Montgomery, as though that means anything. The medical opinion of Charlie Kirk. Anyway, really the point is, you spend a couple of minutes reading through it and you will come away with an even worse impression of Charlie Kirk, and that's usually worth imparting. Okay, let's see. Other things that we really need to chime in on. Let's see. We heard from Greg about the reactions that reporters were getting from employees all over the Hill. And Politico wrote that whole thing up, and they compiled everything. I don't know, did Greg give us a link to that one or not? I have it here in case he didn't. Politico's, their playbook, their morning column, a peek inside the playbook inbox, boiling over with rage. And so it's a nice compilation of all of the various comments that they got from Democrats and Republicans, elected Democrats and Republicans on the Hill, the people who work for them, the nonpartisan employees on Capitol Hill, and basically helping paint a portrait of what it's like there. And I'm guessing that's probably where he pulled the quote about the nonpartisan tech guy having to work in all the offices of Republicans and Democrats alike. But it's a very interesting compilation. I will include that for you as well. I had set that aside even before hearing from Greg on that one. A very interesting looking piece from ProPublica, as is usually the case, that I think we'll get to. I guess you know what? We'll use that to shoehorn in one of the other smaller pieces of the day. The results are in from the Los Angeles police departments. The detectives have been working on this, literally the detectives, working on this for a month. They've gotten to the bottom of that claim by an off-duty police officer that presumably because he had paid for his Starbucks Frappuccino with a PBA or, whatever, his union debit card, he was targeted for retribution by the evil communists behind the coffee bar at Starbucks. And of course, this is the one who claimed that he had been targeted with a tampon, that a tampon had been put in his drink to do the things to him that tampons do, whatever that's supposed to be. I don't know. But it's clearly something that wouldn't belong in a drink, and everyone would be upset to find one. It's just that the picture he took of the object that he removed from the Frappuccino was very clearly, first of all, not a tampon. Second of all, the idea that the staff behind the bar at Starbucks is checking out the tiny logo on every debit card, which they don't touch, and particularly during the pandemic, there's really no interaction. The barista would have had no opportunity to see what sort of debit card this person was using, and if they were off duty, they were dressed in civilian clothing, but maybe they were making a big deal out of being a cop. Maybe they were in there with one of the Blue Lives Matter t-shirts. I don't know. He doesn't seem to claim that. Anyway, the whole thing falls apart, including the claim that it was a tampon, which pretty much every woman in the audience who saw this picture knew pretty soon. Yeah, I hope that's not a tampon. I don't know what kind of tampon that would be. Anyway, it turns out it was a cleaning cloth that was of the sort that is used behind the counters in Starbucks. And so, well, all right, so it was a cleaning cloth and not a tampon. Therefore, something. But, of course, the detectives that took a month to figure out this wasn't a tampon also took a month to figure out what happened here. They find no evidence of any malice on the part of the Starbucks employees. Apparently, according to the Starbucks employees, this thing was somehow, like fell into a cup or was swept up and somehow got mixed into the drink. And that was a horrible mistake, of course. And it's the sort of thing that could get you in trouble or fired, I'm sure, at a Starbucks. But it wasn't found by the detectives, who would have every reason to find this way, that it was intentional. And so Tampon Gate comes to a close. Another big bust. Another a cop telling tales about being targeted when he just wasn't. They're just very, very paranoid people out there working as police officers. Bad for the country. Anyway, we can use that as a place to segue into a very interesting looking and forward looking piece here. Even though it's, I guess it's backward. They might look at it as a backward. There's a follow-up. Is follow-up backward looking? Maybe not. ProPublica here with this piece. We are tracking what happens to police after they use force on protesters. Sounds damn important and looks damn long. I don't know if we're going to get through all this. Certainly not before the break, but let me give you an idea of what this is about. Zipporah Osei, Molly Simon, Moise Syed, and Lucas Waldron share the byline on this piece. These 68 videos, this is the premise of their piece, 68 videos show clear, apparent instances of police officers escalating violence during protests, a very widely made complaint against them. Most departments refuse to share details about investigations and discipline or even offer officers' names. Here's what we learned about each case, and that's an awful lot of cases, so we'll give you a flavor of it before we take our break, and then we'll decide whether we'll continue on with the reading. As protests erupted around the country in late May, in response to the killing in police custody of George Floyd, police departments seemed to respond with more violence. In the ensuing weeks, hundreds of videos of police interactions with protesters surfaced on Twitter and other social media sites, often drawing outrage and, in some cases, swift disciplinary and legal action. ProPublica wanted to find out what happens after these moments are caught on tape. I wanted to know, so I'm glad they're doing this. We culled hundreds of videos to find those with the clearest examples of officers apparently using a disproportionate level of force against protesters, and reached out to 40 law enforcement agencies about the 68 incidents below, which I guess means multiple instances in certain law enforcement agencies. For each incident, we inquired about any disciplinary action, investigations, and whether the department would disclose the officer or officers involved. While some departments provided details or relevant public records, others leaned on state laws to withhold information. Here's what we learned about each case. And, it says, here's what we learned about each case, and then immediately goes into the italicized. Do you have information about one of these cases? Tell us about it. Okay. Maybe some layout editing would be in order here. Interesting format here. And so each one of the videos is displayed in its own box here with the date of the incident and the location and a link in case you are able to help identify the officer in question, a description of what happened, and what we know since then. First example on the list here from Fort Wayne, Indiana on May 29th. After a confrontation with an officer, a protester turns and walks away, but then pauses and holds up her phone. The officer pepper sprays her twice, directly in the face. What else do we know about it? We are aware of the incident, and it is currently under review by our office, says Captain David Nelson of the Fort Wayne Police Department in an email on July 9th. That's it. That's all we know. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. Yeah, it would take forever to get through this thing, but I definitely recommend you take a look. And really, it's visual in nature, but it's very interesting how ProPublica has done this thing. Like I said, each video has its own box. You'll be able to view the video for yourself. Where they have sources for the video, that's there. You know, they're very responsible people there. And they have a standard breakdown and everything. The police department involved, whether or not the officer was identified, whether there's any disciplinary status, the discipline status, pending investigation, yes, no, pending, or unknown, and whether any criminal charges were filed. And the vast majority, officer still remains unidentified, pending investigation happening, and in very few are there results with respect to discipline. There was one in my initial scrolling through from the New York City Police Department in which the officer hasn't yet been identified publicly, but there was a disciplinary action, so they must have identified him. No criminal charges filed. This was the one in which an officer in the passenger seat of a patrol car opens the door of the patrol car while the car is moving for the purposes of hitting a protester standing in a bicycle lane. And apparently the officer was identified internally and placed on modified duty, according to NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea. The Internal Affairs Bureau conducted its investigation and has referred the case to the Department Advocate for disciplinary action. Caught on video here and attributed to Nick at News via Twitter. So, you know, it's just a very interesting breakdown of information and display of, as they said, the 68 videos that most clearly, in their delicate terms reviewed by their editors, most clearly appear to show police abuse. They do show it, but, you know, they have to say appear to show, because it may be the legal conclusion at the end of the investigation that they didn't abuse their authority, but only because the legal standard for deciding whether or not they've abused their authority is ridiculous. Anyway, well worth taking a look at, and well organized there by the folks at ProPublica. Other stories to jump into, there are many. Let's start with this one in no particular order. This one from Lefty Coaster in a diary over at Daily Coast. I thought this was an interesting one, and did he send this one on to me? I can't even recall how it ended up on my plate. But watchdog to FEC. We'll find out which watchdog in the body of the diary. Trump campaign is, quote, laundering $170 million in payments to cronies and family. Interesting. Something we're going to want to pay attention to here on the show. I don't know that if any... I'll be interested to see whether any new dynamics are illustrated here. But of course, it's been all of our suspicion all along that they were laundering money. And if it's just turning campaign donations into payments to the Trump organization, that's something we've known about for quite some time, but it's always good to get the details on exactly how they're doing it and how blatant the thievery really is. Donald Trump, it begins, must realize he is losing, and losing badly, since he seems to be looting his own re-election campaign. And then we have a grab here from The Hill. Watchdog alleges Trump campaign illegally concealed $170 million in spending. The article by Jonathan Easley over at The Hill. And it goes like this, the portion quoted. A nonpartisan watchdog filed a complaint with the FEC, which will go nowhere because they're deadlocked, on Tuesday, alleging President Trump's re-election campaign broke the law by, quote, laundering $170 million in spending in an effort to conceal payments to people close to the Trump family and campaign. The 81-page complaint filed by the Campaign Legal Center, or CLC, alleges that former Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale used a pass-through company to pay downstream vendors, including Trump campaign members, associates, and family members. This illegal conduit scheme leaves voters in the dark about the entities working for the Trump campaign, the nature of their services, and the full amount they are paid, said Brendan Fisher, the CLC's director of federal reform. We don't know all of what is being hidden by this scheme, but we do know that it violates the law. The CLC has asked the FEC to investigate and take action against the campaign for funneling payments through the American-Made Media Consultants, or AMMC, which is the parent company of the Trump campaign, the parent company the Trump campaign allegedly used to conceal the payments. I guess as far as the diary goes, just from there it says, I don't find this behavior terribly surprising. Neither do I, but what I do find surprising is that there's not much more in terms of explanation here. We're going to have to turn over to the Hill article and see what they have to say. Here, the Trump campaign is a massive organization. It has raised more than $947 million this cycle and has thousands of employees. Parscale, remember him, had overseen the campaign's spending until he was demoted a few weeks ago. Some Republicans had criticized him for contracting out campaign work to his own firms and clients, but the Trump campaign has defended his spending. How? I don't know. They just did. The CLC complaint alleges that the Trump campaign cleared $170 million through AMMC, which it says was used as a clearinghouse for payments that were steered to friendly political consulting firms or people who did not register the payments with the FEC. The firms serve as conduits that receive millions in payments from the campaign and disperse the funds to the campaign's ultimate vendors, thereby concealing the campaign's transactions with those vendors. What's left unsaid here is, a situation that we've seen discussed elsewhere, in which, for instance, they take in a tremendous amount of money for the campaign, and then they spend it. For instance, they want to pay, is it Lara? That's Eric's wife, Lara Trump, I believe is her name. She gets paid for producing, basically videos that they include in tweets that go out on Trump TV. She sits in front of a camera. They have a whole staff. They put lighting on her, put makeup on her, etc. And then she says, Donald Trump is awesome. And they videotape it and they send it out. Is that worth anything? No, it's not. But do Eric and Lara want to have a big piece of the $947 million that's just sitting there doing nothing, being wasted on losers who are going to vote for Trump anyway? Yes, they do. Can they have it in the FEC report that Eric and Lara Trump are getting whatever they're getting? I don't know, $1 million, let's say, to do nothing? Because it's going to look bad. I mean, there are going to be people who say, I donated to the Trump campaign. I wanted them to make television commercials with it, not give it to Eric Trump. What does he need it for? Lara Trump, what does she need it for? So what they do is, instead of paying Lara Trump, they have AMMC contract with, whatever, the LTWVC, the Lara Trump Wasteful Video Corporation, or LLC, or something like that. And they, or maybe they just use the letters so that no one can figure it out. And they pay that company, and that company is solely owned by Lara Trump, and she cashes the check. Kim Guilfoyle has a similar arrangement, allegedly. So no surprise here. That all in addition to, of course, the use of Trump properties for campaign events for which they receive rental payments, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty much, that I think much better known than the use of the pass-through companies. All right, so the complaint is made, and the FEC will do nothing with it. They can do nothing with it. They are deadlocked and don't have a legal quorum to act anyway, and the FEC is probably among the worst, most toothless watchdogs that we have in this country. But well worth taking note of it anyway. Let's see. I also see a question being posed here that I don't know we're going to have a chance to address live without doing a little bit of reading, but Adam Bonin happens to be asking this question, not because he's listening live necessarily, but this is a great question, he says, for either Ian Millhiser or for me and other House Rules geeks. Hey, well, okay, that's probably true. Even if there is no new House sworn in on 1/3/21, January 3rd, 2021, is Nancy Pelosi nonetheless still Speaker for line of succession purposes until replaced? That is a good question. My answer off the bat is no, because the House will have dissolved as an entity when it rises and adjourns sine die. Although I suppose if no House is sworn in on the 3rd, very often they wait until the very day that they're swearing in a new Congress to adjourn the previous Congress sine die. But presumably the term of office will have ended as well, since it's constitutionally pegged at 2 years. So I guess it's possible that if this was some sort of scheme to remove her from the succession to the presidency, they'd have an argument that she was no longer Speaker of the House. Let's see. It refers back to a conversation that they're having here. House rules regarding the Speaker of the House state explicitly that the Speaker of the House is in place until a new one is elected by the House. There is no requirement the Speaker of the House be an elected member of the House, etc. Yeah, okay, we're aware of that. But, I'm not so sure. It looks to me like Adam might have come to the same conclusion. I'll check into that. But there you go. Something for you all to ponder, perhaps over the weekend, and see if you can come to an adequate conclusion for Adam. So a homework assignment for the rest of you. All right, let's see. What else have we got here? CNN has generated some serious interest in this story. An exclusive story at that. How Brett Kavanaugh tried to sidestep abortion and Trump financial docs cases. This is also a rather lengthy piece. I'm more interested in the Trump financial docs cases because, as it lays out, I think, in the opening paragraphs here, by Joan Biskupich. Do I have that name correctly pronounced? CNN legal analyst and Supreme Court biographer. That sounds very interesting in terms of what we frequently discuss about my belief that the Supreme Court would attempt to sidestep questions over congressional subpoenas versus executive claims of privilege against those subpoenas, and dodge the whole thing under the political question doctrine, leaving us with no actual answer as to whether or not the subpoenas are enforceable. And apparently that's what Kavanaugh is interested in seeing others adopt as their positions. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh urged his colleagues in a series of private memos this spring to consider avoiding decisions in major disputes over abortion. Another interesting thing for him to be doing, since I thought that he viewed himself as having been placed on the court for the purpose of invalidating abortion law. And Democratic subpoenas for President Donald Trump's financial records, according to multiple sources familiar with the inner workings of the court, which are usually kept in stricter confidence. And I did see some other people saying this is sort of an unusual thing to have leak out of the court, and they wondered whether this might be a leak that actually originated with Kavanaugh or his interests for the purpose of rehabilitating his damaged reputation. It's an interesting theory. In the abortion controversy, Kavanaugh wanted the justices to sidestep any ruling on the merits of a Louisiana law that could have closed abortion clinics in the state, CNN has learned. The case marked the first time in 4 years the justices were taking up the heated subject. Kavanaugh's plan would have ensured the law, a credentialing mandate for doctors who perform abortions, would not go into immediate effect, but also ensured that the justices would not have to put their own views on the line. Sounds very weaselly and probably right up his alley. The same would have been true in the fight between Trump and the U.S. House of Representatives. Kavanaugh's idea, presented to the justices in an internal memo and conversations, sources said, would have had the High Court avoid the subpoena fight over Trump financial documents, based on the judicial principle that courts should stay out of cases involving fundamentally political questions. Ta-da! Correctly predicted. Whether the entirety of the court will agree, of course, remains to be seen. While that strategy could have meant the president had to hand over his documents to congressional investigators, maybe, sources say the personal fate of Trump did not come up in internal conversations. Throughout the recent court sessions, as Kavanaugh revealed a desire to avoid certain thorny dilemmas, the newest justice also demonstrated a pattern of trying to publicly appeal to both sides. His style of accommodation. Is that really, I mean, that's the style he appears to have adopted here. I don't know if that was always his style, but okay. His style of accommodation was on display in recent disputes over gay and transgender workers and, separately, undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children. The details, revealed as part of CNN's series on the justices' private deliberations, show how Kavanaugh is approaching his role on the bench. Behind closed doors, he looks to please dueling factions of the court as he seeks to move beyond the angry and defiant image he projected in 2018. And I think this is probably the paragraph that gave rise to the theory that he might be the leaker in all this. Under normal circumstances, you'd never get your hands on anything like this. The fact that CNN can do a series somehow on the justices' private deliberations is pretty remarkable by itself. But if you saw Kavanaugh at his confirmation hearings, you probably wouldn't have pegged him as someone who, behind closed doors, looks to please dueling factions. And I think, in fact, he is not someone who, behind closed doors, looks to ordinarily to please dueling factions. He may be doing it now in order to help repair his reputation, or he may be lying about what he does behind closed doors so that you print an article that makes him sound good, because it sounds like a good thing. A person who's behind closed doors trying to please dueling factions, a peacemaker with judicial temperament, which is not what he showed us at all during his confirmation hearings. Maybe he used to be like that but got all riled up during the hearings, or maybe that was his true self at the hearings and this is his attempt to repair it, or maybe that was his true self at the hearings and this is BS about how he's trying to repair things when he's really not. No one can tell for sure. His searing confirmation hearings, wherein he denied allegations that he had sexually assaulted Christine Blasey Ford when they were teenagers, remain fresh. He decried the claims as part of a vengeful partisan campaign against him. Having undergone that divisive battle, Kavanaugh, in his writing, appears keenly aware of tenuous public opinion of him and ready to adopt a posture of conciliation with his colleagues as he tries to influence deliberation on cases. For much of his professional life, the 55-year-old Yale law graduate was laser-focused on the Supreme Court. He had been a law clerk to Justice Anthony Kennedy, assistant to independent counsel Ken Starr, and a top legal aide to President George W. Bush. Kavanaugh maintained connections to powerful people who helped him climb the rungs of the judiciary. In 2018, Trump chose Kavanaugh to succeed Kennedy, convinced by advisors that the Bush loyalist would be true to Trump and his brand of conservatism. Kavanaugh has not turned his back on the politicians who guaranteed his high court ascension, but his writing has suggested he does not want to appear to be a reflexive conservative vote, particularly against women. Yes, that would be problematic for him. Now, the next section is Kavanaugh's proposed abortion dodge, which is very interesting and maybe of more interest to some of you than the next section, but I actually was more interested in the next section, and this is a rather lengthy article. I'm going to skip down a bit to this part, avoiding a political fight with the president, and recommend the reading to you about the abortion cases, perhaps on your own time or this weekend, which is the same thing, really. Kavanaugh's nomination in 2018, it begins, ignited one of the most partisan moments of the Trump presidency. This spring, Kavanaugh privately raised a way out of a separate battle involving the president who appointed him and the Democratic-run House of Representatives, which has been investigating Trump on multiple fronts. The House had impeached Trump in December of 2019, but had then seen its charges rejected in a Senate acquittal of Trump in February. The unrelated Supreme Court dispute known as Trump v. Mazars began after the U.S. House had directed subpoenas at Trump's accountants, Mazars USA, and two of his banks, Capital One and Deutsche Bank. Trump's lawyers argued that the subpoenas lacked any valid legislative purpose. Kavanaugh raised the theory known as the political question doctrine, which holds that certain disputes are more properly worked out between the political branches rather than by judges. He theorized that the case might be left to the usual back and forth of the White House and Congress to figure things out. I mean, I think it's a poor idea if you want to resolve the issues, because, of course, the normal or the usual back and forth between the White House and Congress doesn't really apply in this case. The White House announced early in a blanket statement that they would refuse to comply with any and all congressional subpoenas across the board. So, and of course, everyone knows Trump's track record. He's not a part of the usual back and forth between the White House and Congress. That's not happening here. Kavanaugh, though, said his approach would provide an off-ramp for one of the imminent confrontations between Trump and the court. During one of the justices' private teleconferences, according to three sources, Kavanaugh convinced his colleagues to ask for supplemental filings on whether the political question doctrine applied or there was any other reason the justices could not decide the case. He just doesn't want them deciding it. Because really, honestly, if you do settle it, in all likelihood, you have to uphold congressional subpoena power. And if you do that, then Trump will look bad, and you can't have that. And so we have to find something else. But totally invalidating congressional subpoena power holds a lot of, a lot of difficulty involved in that as well. You completely blow up one of the major checks and balances as between the branches and declare an immediate executive dictatorship. And, you don't want to be putting your name to that necessarily. Let's see. The discussion among the justices, sources said, concerned the practicalities of whether the issue Kavanaugh had raised would be relevant to the case involving private parties and whether it was prudent to make the late-hour request. That is another wrench in the machinery there. It's not a straight-up fight between two political branches of the government. It does involve private entities here, and it's not entirely clear that the political doctrine is a clean escape. But there was a larger canvas that captured the attention of commentators once it became known that justices were mulling the idea as they asked for new filings in April. Kavanaugh and other conservatives have long sought to bolster executive power, and if the High Court were to decide that the House subpoena case was too political to resolve, it would dramatically undermine congressional power. Congress's investigative committees would be unable to turn to courts to enforce orders against the president and his people, which, of course, I don't think they discuss it in this article, but you and I know from our previous discussions that leaves inherent contempt the only existing option. And wouldn't it be something, it wouldn't put it past the Gimitarian justices like I believe Kavanaugh is, to step in and agree to take a case invalidating inherent contempt as a valid tool of congressional oversight, even though that would clearly be right down the center of the political question doctrine, especially if they first decide that asking the courts to enforce statutory contempt were too political for them. Let's see, where did we leave off here? Yet in this particular controversy involving Trump's accountants and banks, if the High Court were to declare that the House subpoenas were beyond the reach of judges, there would arguably be no way for Trump to prevent his financial institutions from providing his records to House investigators, like they voluntarily did early on in all of this. You can't undo it. And if the justices say, hey, we cannot adjudicate this dispute, and the records are turned over voluntarily, they can't step in and undo it, unless, of course, they just declare that they can because gimmitarianism. Don't forget that that's an option for them. The short-term loss could be Trump's, although sources said that did not enter into the discussions. The justices concentrated on the larger issues of any president versus the Congress, sources told CNN. In their filings, the parties to the case said the High Court had the authority, indeed the responsibility, to decide the case. Kavanaugh's idea, in the end, also failed to sway other justices, and Kavanaugh backed away from it, sources said. So that's, I guess, good news for congressional subpoena power, bad news for my theory about what they eventually would do with it when it reached the court. Had a majority gone in that direction, it could have meant avoiding votes on the highly charged battle between Trump and congressional Democrats, yet a separate subpoena dispute was pending between Trump and the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance, over Trump's tax returns, and Kavanaugh knew the justices would have to confront that one. In the House case, Kavanaugh eventually signed on to Roberts' opinion for a 7-justice majority, which said Trump could be forced to turn over the financial records if the House could justify its request, which is not exactly a win for them. But in the companion case revolving around Trump's effort to block a subpoena from the Manhattan District Attorney, Kavanaugh offered something to both sides. He agreed that Trump does not possess absolute immunity from a state criminal subpoena. Every justice agreed with that proposition. But then he wrote for himself and fellow Trump appointee Gorsuch to assert a tough standard for prosecutors trying to obtain a president's records. And from there on, I guess we're talking here in this section about, Kavanaugh emphasizing his differences with Alito and Thomas, which I guess is supposed to be comforting to those of us who believe he would simply fall in line with them on their votes in almost every case. But again, it's in his public relations interest to make sure that people don't believe that that's what he has in mind, even if it really is. All right, that brings us to pretty much to the end of the show today. We've got the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next, of course, but not quite time for us to roll our music about that one. So let's see what else we can contemplate either for a Friday show if we're able to tape one, or beginning of next week, or just things that I think you ought to be looking at over the weekend. You know what? Somebody forwarded this thread to me. We've been talking, or I have been mentioning, that at least we were hearing anecdotes about slowdowns at the post office and worries from people that this was perhaps part of a larger plan to slow things down if we were largely dependent on mail-in ballots to do our voting in November. Interesting. But this, I guess, a couple of stories from Cassie LaBelle, who tweets as Cassie Celeste, Cassie, and then Celeste, no spaces or anything. She claims, we haven't been able to verify anything. We haven't tried. I'm sure it's all true. I run a small online business, she says. Very plausible, right? And I use the U.S. Postal Service for all my shipping. I probably mail 100 packages a week and have been doing so for years. I don't think most people understand, she says, the scope of what has been happening over the last month or so in terms of delays. Interesting. First-class mail, letters and packages, used to always arrive within a week or so. Always. I can't even count the number of packages I sent domestic via USPS that experienced significant delays, though, over the past few years because the number was so small. In other words, very reliable service. We like that. Everything was going fine. Since DeJoy took over the U.S. Postal Service, 5 to 10% of my mail is taking weeks to be delivered. Some have been stuck in the system for over a month. Buyers are pissed, and systems like eBay and TCG Player, I don't know that one, aren't set up to deal with mass postal delays that aren't the seller's fault. The system didn't fail, it's being sabotaged. I can show you my shipping records and prove to you that it's being sabotaged, and I don't know what I'm going to do if it keeps down this path because alternative shipping companies do not have competitive small business rates. The other problem? If I'm buying something that I 100% need to have right now, I'm going to Amazon and making sure I buy it via Prime. I have to. And so the consolidation continues. There's an awful lot out there, and her thread continues for some time. It's very worrisome that this could be in for some sabotage, and as others have pointed out, it's really a lifeline for rural America, which is supposed to be Trump's base, and yet, well, I guess he just doesn't care about them as much as he cares
From
about
Daily
power.
Coos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, much going on around the country and around the world that we didn't get to, but of course it is the assignment of Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to make up for that. Stay tuned as he makes his tour around the country and around the world to make up for our lack of attention to so many of those interesting stories. So glad he follows us in this and gives us clues for what to do next.